next, we thought it would be great to bring up my boss, which is the CEO of LucidWorks. And typically with Paul, he likes to do stump the chump type of exercises, but then he makes folks like Grant and Haas and those guys feel bad. So we're actually going to take another angle and start to talk about just sort of the state of search in general and sort of what it means and these trends and a little bit what we talked about yesterday. Also want to note, I know some folks have said in the rooms and in some of the sessions that can sometimes be hard to see, especially the more technical things. So I just want to reiterate that we're going to have all these things posted online, all the videos recorded, presentations available. So just check in on lucianrevolution.org. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the CEO of LucidWorks, Paul Doscher, and Michael Collins.
How's everybody feeling this morning? Pretty good? I'm pretty foggy, so don't worry about that. So my name is Michael Collins. I haven't met a lot of you. I'm actually the head of product marketing and communications at LucidWorks. And the fun thing is I just started. I'm literally on like day 5. And all I've done is read a bunch of reports and grilled the web. And so I've prepped about 300 questions. And probably the only time in my career I get to sit here in front of almost 200 plus people and roast my boss. And so we're going to have a little fun with this. He has no idea what I'm going to ask him. We purposely are doing this very impromptu. And so, I'm going to very much bring this as a conversation as somebody who's completely new to the industry. I came from the cloud space, and so I think you're going to find me take this in a lot of different directions, and we're going to open it up to Q&A. And so I hope you get a lot of enjoyment out of this. But I think we should start with Paul. Give us a lens into just LucidWorks and how they fit into the ecosystem, what they mean to search, and how they got here.
So very quickly, sort of the thumbnail is LucidWorks was founded back in 2007, and 3 of the 4 co-founders were all Lucene Solar committers. And the original vision was very much to build the red hat of Lucene Solar, to provide services and support and training. And the company actually did pretty well by that. But what happens, for those of you who don't know, in Silicon Valley, you don't really get a lot of venture funding or venture interest from a services-based business. And so eventually the company realized that they needed to start to deliver more commercial technology that would run on top of Lucene Solar and provide really a faster time to value for a lot of enterprises. So in late 2011, we released a commercial technology that runs on top of Lucene Solar, and right now we've probably got about 100 to 150 customers that use the commercial product. And the way I describe it is, quite easily, if you have more time than money, in most cases, you'd rather control your own destiny and use the open source. If you've got more money than time, then sometimes you just buy the license because we put things in like security and connectors and stuff like that that help you get the search application up and running faster. What we're now seeing, though, is sort of the company evolves, is we're seeing a lot more interest in the big data space. And it has to do, of course, all around scale. And we're seeing more and more companies come to us and say, okay, I got this Hadoop instance and it's great, but I don't want to hire an army of data scientists. So how do I get search and how do I put it on top of Hadoop? And so we're starting to see a lot of these really interesting applications. And based on everything that you've heard and everything that everybody's been talking about, I think a lot of the future of search is going to be, of course, all around how do you make it scale? How do you start to actually get access to the mountains and mountains of information that's out there right now? So
it's interesting. So you talk about big data. Of course, it's a buzzword, and it's going to stick around. We heard Will throw up some frightening stats. How does search stay parallel in development with how much data we're delivering and producing on a daily basis?
Well, I thought what Grant did was great. 60 billion, was it? Something like that. I mean, somebody said yesterday, I think it was, that search has been big data before big data got cool. I mean, people have been sort of pushing the envelope there for a long, long time.
Right.
And I know that, based on a number of things, based on what you all folks, based on what you say and what goes on to the mailing list, our committers understand what it is as a community people want to see in the technology and in the product. There's a lot of what Grant already covered. The second dimension, of course, is customers that deal with us directly. Companies that use our professional services or support, to make sure that it stays up and running.
Right.
That becomes another data feed, another data input to us. And then it's our partners. I mean, we're partnered with, folks like Cloudera and MapR and DataStax and folks like that are sort of the next set of data stores that are going to drive the big data movement. And through that channel, we also get a lot of input, as to where this thing needs to go. So there's very much a roadmap, believe it or not, that we work on around the open source code and around the open source project. Of course, then simultaneously, there's a whole bunch of commercial features and that people come to us as well. And so we try and keep those two obviously very separate so that, we don't sort of, compromise on church and state.
But it's this big, right? So, big data is this big. And then what's interesting when you start talking the scale and you bring everybody in the room into play is I've met people from countries all over the world in this room. And so now, how do you tie all that together and keep it synchronous in so much that you have people from around the world contributing? Search is global. It's part of every single thing we do. And yet we try to make sure that it's streamlined. How do you keep that all together?
I don't know. My head's going to explode maybe. I don't know.
It's not drugs. It's not drugs, is it?
No.
Okay.
You really, it's all based on your success. All the people in here are involved in search and implementing systems and applications that are driving, your business success or meeting the needs and criteria of your customers. And that's really sort of what is ultimately what determines what goes in, what goes out, what we work on, what we don't work on, how the project actually succeeds. My own personal bias is that I believe Lucene Solar is the most broadly deployed search technology in the world. We can't go into almost any enterprise in the world and not at least find a copy of it somewhere where some developers brought it in because they've had to address a specific business problem. They couldn't go through all the nonsense around the company procurement, and they just needed to get something up and running quickly and just sort of prove a business case, support a project, and move on. So I think you're going to see that more and more because I think search is ubiquitous, and I think search is the next paradigm in terms of information access and information development. Because there's no other technology, at least that I'm aware of, and I'd be curious if anybody in the audience could push back on this, that with all of the information and the new data stores that are coming out and the way the new content types, whether it's video or audio or whatever, there's no technology currently that I think at the enterprise disposal, like search, that can go ahead and build the new information management applications. Would anybody disagree with that? I mean, because my own personal, history is I came up through business intelligence, so I understand relational databases and data warehouses, and I worked at Business Objects, and I also was one of the co-founders of an open source project called JasperSoft, which is the open source BI tool. So I get that. I know what it's good for. I know what it does. But then when you look at all the new content and the ability for search to contextually integrate information from all these different sources, no matter what the underlying data stores are, and provide that interface to the end users, I don't think there's another technology that can match it. And I don't see one on the future. I don't see anybody. Everybody invented a new, Hadoop is, a lot of people look at it as a data warehouse 2.0. If I can be so bold, the big thing is they shove now all their transactions in there. But in terms of actually then aggregating that information, putting it in front of a business decision maker, whether you're executive or in customer support or marketing, search is the best technology I know of, if not the only technology I know of that's available to the enterprise today to do that.
Excuse me.
So I guess I say I like our future.
I guess so. The one thing that really got me interested in search is, from a technical perspective, it's awe-striking what happens. Truly as more of a business person than technical, kudos to everybody in the room. But the interesting thing that I saw missing in the conversations that we had was how this impacts the end user, the customer's customer. It is very much an experience. You'll hear people say, I'm going to Google it, not to bring up the brand bully, but where do you look at the end user in all this? Is it about moving the needle forward so that it's easy to deploy, it's scalable, it's all these things, or is it about the end user's ability to do X?
I think that's ultimately it, but here's what I envision anyway. We all know that Lucene Solar is a top-level project inside the Apache Software Foundation, and a lot of the projects inside of the Apache Software Foundation now are all being driven by this whole big data space. You have Hadoop, you have Mahout, you have Pig, you got all the farm animals, Zookeeper. The next evolution of search is actually going to be, in my opinion, the integration, the intelligent integration of these capabilities that will start to invert the proposal in a way that instead of people having to go search for stuff, instead of your customers having to go look for things, that the machine is going to get smarter. And the machine is going to be able to filter information, and based on who you are in the enterprise, what your access rights are, what your history is, what kind of role and responsibility you have, I think the machine is going to now start to present information to you of things that you need to be aware of. And I think the people in this room are going to be the pioneers that are going to be exploring those new opportunities. Our challenge as a vendor is to intelligently integrate those tools and those capabilities so that you have the ability to, sort of load them and to, build them and to drive them, through a set of APIs, and you don't have to worry about, the plumbing, if you will. But I think that's where search is going, because with all of the, the zettabytes, and I couldn't even imagine a zettabyte. I don't even know what the hell it is, but you can imagine that.
It's when you turn your head and you go, holy shit, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, I mean, I can't envision where somebody, if I'm an executive in a large corporation, or I'm driving an e-commerce website, I can't imagine how I'm, as a product manager or something, how I'm going to assume or accumulate or actually absorb all the information, that comes at me every day. That's crazy, and that's just accelerating. So I think the ability for you folks in this room, and this is where I guess I would challenge you, to push us as a vendor so that your capacity to use all of the tools that are available and all the technologies that are available to make your job easier, to make your consumer's life better. I'll give you an example. So everybody knows about Amazon, right? So Amazon has changed the game in retail, right? Because their numbers are just off the charts. And they're so arrogant about it that they don't even worry about driving profits. They're just trying to drive that train as hard and as fast as they can. And every other website in the world is trying to catch up. Well, what they did is they obviously took search to a whole different level. It's a whole different paradigm when you look at clickstream analysis and intelligent processing of results, being able to crowdsource information to make recommendations and cross-sell and upsell. They've sort of changed the whole paradigm in terms of how e-retailers have a capacity to go ahead and sell you merchandise, right? Mm-hmm. That's what's going to go on with information, I believe, in the next 3 to 5 years across the board. Enterprises can't keep up right now with all the information. You talk about social media, you talk about your own internal systems and applications, talk about all of the unstructured and the videos and the audios and things like that. It really is going to be our challenge as a vendor, and then your challenge as developers, I would suggest to you, to enable and to integrate all of this capacity and all of this technology so that you develop applications like that and they deliver the range of opportunity that this information provides.
So you start bringing up the big brand names, and I'm going to take one of my right turns and have liberty with being on stage right now. Let's bring up the ugly thing called the analyst. And we never like to talk about them because it's pay to play, and they just tell, they'll tell the world what you want in many ways. But when you look at what a lot of the analysts will talk about, they bring up the brand bullies, they bring up the Oracles, they bring up the Microsofts, they bring up the Googles. I think it's fun to not be one of them and to be the person that, is quote unquote chasing the behemoths. But as a CEO, you look at it from not only from the vendor landscape, but also from the community landscape. What's the world of the vendor ecosystem look like? And also, I think more importantly, from the open source groundswell, do you see something happening that a lot of us aren't aware of?
I don't know if I have any other insight more than the people in the room, but I do want to pause just real quick and ask a question. How many people have used commercial search technologies in their enterprises? Okay. How many people, if you don't mind, with the people that raised their hand, how many of you have switched off a commercial platform to open source? Yeah, about half the group. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but why did you switch?
Mostly control.
Control.
When something's wrong, we want to fix it right now.
Right.
It needs to be available and fixable, and we need to have more control on our software.
Right.
That's about most of it.
What about you, sir? What did you switch? So the first gentleman said it was control. Okay, that's very classic, open source, control my own destiny. Second gentleman said the company obviously was fast, was bought by Microsoft, and now sort of that roadmap in terms of being an independent third-party enterprise search technology has gotten a little wonky. Well, of course, they've just consumed it inside of SharePoint. And so, yeah, they're deprecating it, and they're actually going to stop, I think, support in 2015. The interesting thing about search is, if you look at it historically, and I've been in this industry about 30 years, search has been around for a long time. Verity and those guys, UltraSeek and stuff were available back in late or early 1990s. So I mean that's how long it's been around, and companies like Fast and Autonomy and Endeca and those guys have built very large enterprises, commercial software companies. So I see it sort of two ways. One, my sort of overall vision is that open source is starting to dominate in the enterprise. You start at what Red Hat did at the lowest level of the operating system and how much market share they've gained now. You look at the app servers and you just see open source now going up the stack. And it becomes more and more an opportunity to commoditize commercial software companies with easily controllable, destiny roadmap, community contributed, peer reviewed, innovation in code. One of the things that I worked at Oracle, I worked at Business Objects, I worked at VMware. One of the things you realize in a commercial software company is that the roadmap becomes constrained because you start to have to worry about not only what your customers are asking for, but the architectural and design decisions that you make that start to, over time, start to creep into your overall technology platform, and your ability to innovate becomes less and less real over time. Open source, you don't have that. I mean, just look at the Lucene Solar community. There's 30, 35, 40 committers around the world, some of which are independent contractors, some of which are, work for us, some of them work for IBM. I mean, it's really sort of this great group of forward-thinking people that just love this as a passion and get up every day and figure out how to make it better and how to innovate. So that brings a whole different set of dynamics and characteristics. So my first point is that open source, I think, is going to just continue to overtake in the enterprise because of issues around control and independence and vendor-neutral capabilities. The second thing in terms of enterprise search, now that all the commercial guys have been acquired by large, they're all being now controlled by the roadmaps of the parent. I'll give you an example. We had a company call us up that was using Endeca. Obviously, most of you all know, if not all, they were acquired by Oracle. They were paying, I want to say, and you'll forgive me if I'm off by a bit of an order of magnitude, but let's say they were paying about $200,000 a year in annual maintenance to Endeca. So their renewal was up, and the Oracle rep showed up, and the Oracle rep said, that'll be $20 million. No joke, 20 million bucks. And of course, they were trying to shove the whole Fusion, platform, right in behind this little Endeca application. But that's what happens, I mean, when you get controlled by, a large enterprise. I mean, we're seeing a similar, dynamics both at HP and of course with Fast. So, it's just that's the way they go. What I think is also interesting, if you think about it, though, none of these large enterprises acquired a search technology because they thought it was going to be cool, right? They're all responding to what they see the needs in the marketplace are, where search has become a critical component of their technology stack to address, again, what I call this next generation of information applications. And so it just became sort of a natural progression for them to need this, to have this part of their technology stack so that they could, that whole one throat to choke thing.
Right, right.
But I think a lot of CIOs and a lot of developers especially are going to more with the, hey, I want to control my own destiny. I want to be independent. I want to be able to address the needs of my enterprise. And if there's a problem, I want to be able to fix it. Or I want to be able to talk to guys who can fix it. I don't want to wait for the next release or the next patch or, the next maintenance upgrade because I just honestly don't have the time.
It's interesting. A lot of what you're talking about is this next generation of app, and having been in the cloud space and the app space, one of the things I heard when I was at a former vendor was always talking about building apps and the applications know better than what's underneath it. And yet what I'm hearing, a lot of what you're saying is it's about the information, it's about the data that's going to drive the app. So when you're moving that fast and you have all these different inputs, and when you think about open source, I mean, this room is developing 50 times faster than any single person or company can. How does the enterprise respond to that? How does the enterprise, and I'm not picking on you, just we had a conversation. How does his organization take data, take search, take all the abilities and stay either focused and or do they right turn and where's the right turn?
Let me see if I can understand where that question was going.
I'm not going to tell you.
Here's what I think. I think it has to work from the business problem in, right? So all of you, I'm sure, are challenged every day, in your organizations around what is the next competitive threat to your business, what's the next opportunity, how do I decrease costs, how do I drive revenue? Everything that we provide is a tool, it's a hammer, right? And so you got to find, what are the right nails. The cool thing that I like about search and why I'm so just thrilled to be with this company and in this particular space is because, and this is something I would challenge you on, I think the definition of what searches can work within and what it's good at doing is evolving almost on a daily basis. To realize now that inside of a Lucene Solar Index, you can have structured content. You can integrate structured and unstructured and semi-structured information, and you can present all that in a logical way through a dashboard, is something that a few years ago, nobody even ever envisioned. I mean, you saw one of our partners up there, Zoom Data, and what they're able to provide and what they're able to demonstrate and to show through a dashboard that's all being driven by a search platform. And so I think the overlap between what people consider classic business intelligence around reporting and dashboards and structured information off a database and stuff, I think that and search are becoming blurred. And I think the way that companies and individuals specifically, because it's all got to become a personalized experience. That's where I think search is going. Whether you're on the web or whether you're in the enterprise, the system has to know and the application has to know who you are, what you're able to see, what information you're able to access, why do you need that, that data, and what the sort of the cause and effect relationships are through this integration of information. And again, I would ask the people in the room, but I don't see any other technology in the enterprise that has the ability to deliver, on that particular content or actually make that company successful.
So we were having a conversation, and I somewhat gave the analogy that when you think about a car, you have the chassis, right? Without the chassis, you don't have a vehicle. And yet when we go to purchase vehicles, at least in the States, we don't ask about the chassis. We ask about the heads-up display and does it have navigation and will it cook toast and all the other things that we think about, but we never say the chassis. And I think that's a lot about, very, very similar, if you will, to search, right? It's understated. And I think a lot of what happens in this room, people don't appreciate because it's just there. Is search as a feature and as a technology from the end user perspective an expectation that isn't appreciated?
Yeah, but I don't think they care. Does anybody care here that, in your organizations, does anybody get real excited when you say, hey, I want to use Lucene Solar to deliver that app? Do they really ever care? Anybody? Yeah, no, everybody's laughing. Of course not. The engine is important, that's what we do. The WYSIWYG on the dashboard is what the CEO wants to see.
Right.
If he doesn't get his WYSIWYG on the dashboard, believe me, there's going to be somebody that's going to pay for it, I'm sure. And so I think that's where the interface is. That's where the friction is. The friction is between what we're delivering as a vendor and what we're putting in the box, and then what you're able to do with that and actually, sort of make happen in the enterprise. So I think that natural synergy and that friction of pushing the envelope and forcing us to be better and to do more is something that's going to continue to make us a great company and continue to make Lucene Solar, like I said, the most broadly deployed search technology in the world. So I think it's an exciting future. Can I ask a question to the audience, if you don't mind? How many of you have been in the search space for more than 5 years? Okay. How many of you in the room believe that search will now be your career for the rest of the time that you're in IT? Okay, a lesser percentage. That's interesting. And can I ask you, if you don't mind, can I ask you, if you don't think it's going to be, is there a reason why? Is it something that you think is sort of an interim step for you? Or is it something that you think is going to become passé? In other words, is search going to sort of crest at some point in time in terms of big data and delivering applications, and then something else is going to move and take over it? Any feedback?
Data structure is always going to be there, and that will be core. But towards the very end, when you talk about businesses and multiple applications trying to model their data, it's around their head. Search is difficult for them. because they have to, initially with databases, they started normalizing.
Right.
Now with search, they start denormalizing. But every single time you have to map a problem, it's difficult for them. So, and the problems you're trying to solve, which are more not tuned towards search. So we have these sessions like Chum the Chump. We do the same thing in our offices all the time. It's around the problems to have hacks around it. So in that manner, I don't think search is going to be there. There is some other technology is going to come up. And I have few options on that hand, but right now search is there, and the primary reason it is being used a lot is because the improvements in hardware and memory and how cheap they are. 5 years before it was not there, so memory was expensive, people couldn't do all these things, so search engines were just not there, and that's where databases ruled.
Okay.
But it's very difficult to map and model a search problem.
Okay.
And there are other technologies which have been coming up, which are already solving that problem.
Okay.
Modeling is a completely different game, but once you turn your head around it, it just happens.
Oh.
You don't have to mess around and have sessions to just think about how to solve those problems.
Interesting.
Do you think the life cycle is going to be what I think is as short as cloud? I personally think that this whole cloud thing is
It's longer than that, but when you're looking at standard applications, you're fine. You'll be there for a long time. But you think about applications when you want to recommend stuff, when you want to do related stuff, graphs are going to take over.
No, Paul, I saw a lot of heads nodding. Are there other questions? I'd kind of like to let other people roast the boss as well. I saw heads nodding. Other questions or comments, and we can just kind of make this interactive.
I just wanted to address the comment that you made about, thank you, about the ability to innovate in open source compared to, enterprise software companies. And I mean, I think you hit on something that really is attractive to people about this community, which is the pace of innovation. But I think that I see it less as a distinction between open source and, proprietary software as much as it's about maturity. I mean, eventually you have customers who are relying on the old version of your software. Whether they're customers that are paying you or they're just people who are relying on your open source project, you have to make the decision about whether to continue to support them or not, or just move on to something new. And that's the thing that really slows the pace of innovation, I think, is the need to have backwards compatibility and support. And so, I think this community can move faster than people who are, have to be paid. But that's still a concern, even in the open source community, because you still have a lot of people running the old version. I don't know, do you abandon them? How does that work?
What's great about the open source space, as we said, I think this gentleman over here is running 1.4 or something like that. Have we abandoned him? God, I hope he doesn't feel like he's been abandoned. That certainly isn't our intention. We would obviously encourage them to upgrade, to take advantage of the latest features. So it's a different relationship between us as a vendor that supports an open source project and a commercial enterprise. The biggest difference is that because we probably don't have a support relationship, we're under no obligation to fix a bug in a prior release. And that's where commercial software companies really get wrapped around the axle. Because we will go ahead and work with somebody from an open source perspective, and we will be very upfront and honest in terms of what our capacity is to go and repair something in a prior version. But basically, open source is the train is moving.
Hey, you can fix it yourself. So
You can ultimately, yeah.
Well, I think we also have to just address the 100-pound gorilla, which is if you want to develop something, what prohibits you? Where's the politics in an open source? Where are the leaders telling you to go this direction or go that direction or stop what you're doing? Because the great thing is you get to think and ideate without Big Brother in many ways, and I think that that's something that allows that innovation to continue to spur forward, and you don't feel handcuffed.
well, thank you.
Other
Anybody?
questions? Right here.
You said that search solves the problems of big data. Okay, I can start again. Search solves the problems of big data, and but if you think about it, how can you define search apart from the technology that implements it? Is there a definition of search that you have? Like Lucene is a very pluggable technology, and
Right.
You can do a lot of things with it. And like this databases, what's the difference between search and a database, or what isn't search? Can you?
Okay, I'll take my shot at it, but I welcome other people's input. If you look at the parallels between the evolution of relational database and then big data, or the new data models, NoSQL and Hadoop and things like that. When Oracle started to gain traction in the late 1980s and early 1990s, there was a quick acceleration of this movement to now relational databases are all the rage, and that's what you got to do, and you got to normalize your data and all that stuff. And then there was tools built on top of those, business intelligence tools, and then it was like, okay, but now I got all these databases, and I can't really report off them, and I got all these applications, so now I need a data warehouse. So now I got to consume or consolidate all that into a data warehouse, and now I'm going to put my business intelligence and my reporting format on there. And then after that came the applications. That's when Oracle apps and SAP and PeopleSoft and stuff. Now they started developing actually applications that people could use that were, repeatable across all the majority of enterprises, right? So that whole period probably took about 12, 15 years, from beginning to end. And it all accumulated around 2000, right? When the people didn't change the digits and all that nonsense. If you look at the big data space with the Hadoop and the NoSQL stores, the evolution and the acceleration from where we are today to applications is going to be in 3 years. So the pace of change of what's going to happen in the evolution of this market space is going to be, I would suggest, 3 to 4 times faster. Because the venture capitalists, I'm going to get to answering your question in a second, so don't worry, I didn't forget. Venture capitalists right now are looking at no longer investing in infrastructure, they're looking at investing in the next generation of big data applications. And that's what they want, whether they're vertical, specific, or horizontal applications where they're repeatable and there's something that companies can take and have all of the plumbing already done, and then they could go ahead and start to really deliver value to the enterprise. Every single big data instance has search as a component of that technology stack. And the reason why they have it is because the data is now a different definition in the overall delivery of information than it was when it was just a database and it was just structured information. Gartner says that with the acceleration of information, right, the way it is right now, and you saw some of the statistics, they, like I said, they boggle the mind, 80 to 90% of that is unstructured or semi-structured. And that's what search started, that's what its roots are, that's what it's very good at, and that's what's going to drive the next generation of information applications and decision support systems. Anywhere you read nowadays in the press, they're all talking about the CEO and the CIO and the CFO have to convert their company to being a data-driven company. That's not something that the relational database or the business intelligence marketplace could ever assume in its wildest dreams. And so search now becomes an integral part. I mean, being part of the Apache Software Foundation and having all of these other projects that sort of work around this ecosystem all around scale, at the end of the day, they're only as good as their ability to deliver a solution and to deliver an application that's going to drive a business. And companies are all looking at how they start to now convert themselves to being a data-driven organization. And so, now to answer your question specifically, search, in my mind, is the best user interface or app dev platform on top of a big data repository, period, in today's market. So something might come along. Technology is what technology does. But in today's market, if you want to, get the data scientist out of the way and deliver this robust set of repository, this reservoir of content that you've shoved into Hadoop, and you want to give that to a business person, in my opinion, there's no better technology to deliver that app than a search platform. And let me give you 2 examples. So large telecommunication companies that we work with, okay? So for the first time, and this is something I found out as I was talking to this company, that cellular phone companies lose on the aggregate between $15 and $20 billion a year in fraudulent long-distance telephone calls. $15 to $20 billion a year. So there's one company we're talking to, we're going to take all their call data records and put it in Hadoop. Okay? And what they were going to do is they were going to parse that record so that they could identify what the fraudulent bits were. Because what happens is if I'm making a call from here to India As soon as it hits the India phone switch, it converts and it looks like a local phone call. So the telephone companies lose all that long distance revenue. So what they wanted to do is parse their call data records so they could identify the fraudulent bits, because with the search tool, right, you got all this data in Hadoop, and now you can start to look at anomalies, right, across all the different records. So they were going to find out what the fraudulent bits were, and they were going to reprogram the switch so that as soon as it saw those bits in the call data record, it was going to turn off the call. That one application by itself was going to save this one cellular provider between $1.5 and $2 billion a year. Tell me that's not a good return on investment. And there's no way that they could do it because there was no other data facility that they've had to accumulate all the call data records, that they get on a week, month, or a year. So that's one application. I'll give you another one. So there's an insurance company, very large company in the US. They're loading all of their claims information into Hadoop, right, for their entire history. There's some 50, 60-year-old insurance company, right, property and casualty. What they're doing now is they're using search on top of Hadoop so that they can start to see across all these different claims elements of fraud. Fraud based on geography, fraud based on product, fraud based on a third-party relationship that they may not have been able to identify before, because before all they could take was a statistically relevant sample set, which means they could only really catch the really obnoxious ones who were really greedy, all right? So now they have an ability to do it at a much lower level of granularity that they had before, and that one application is going to save them tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And why? Why? Because there's Hadoop, because there's no SQL stores, because now there's an ability to capture data. And to your point, storage, compute, resources, storage, all that stuff is a lot cheaper, but you also now have a data facility that allows you to put all that information in regardless of the, having to structure it or normalize it or build your files or whatever like that. So you got it all in there, but now you got to get it out. Now you actually have to give that to somebody who can effectively review and analyze that information in terms of understanding, what do I do next? What's the next thing I need to do for the business now that I have all that information in front of me? Again, I know I'm biased, I'm not totally objective here, but I think search is the best user interface that there is.
Let me go at it from a different perspective. Anybody in the room work for a consumer company? Consumer-based products, telecos, okay. As a consumer, I expect my iPad to work. I expect my cell phone to work. I expect. Users have unstated demands nowadays. Who has multiple devices? Everybody in the room. We expect them to work. So with that expectation, we have these experiences. That's why we buy these devices. I left investment banking to come into marketing because what you do, people don't appreciate. I love marketing technology because people just don't give a shit. They just expect it to work. They expect it to be there. So with that expectation is an experience, and an experience generates an emotion, right? Brands are all about eliciting an emotion. Bad brands are just logos nobody gives a shit about. Search is the experience that I turn to when I need, when I want. Where is my? How do I? That's not going to change. Changing consumer behavior and expectations is one of the hardest things to do, not only from a human psychology perspective, but from just who we are as individuals. I don't care about a database. I don't care about cloud. I don't care about. I was talking to somebody here about whether or not to use Google Drive versus Dropbox versus. And it was because, where was my document? How do I? So I take a very different approach to your question to say people don't change very easily. People are actually very reticent to change. Search is now part of everything we do. Last night, anybody use their phone to find something? How are you going to find the Guinness Brewery? How are you going to find the airport? Right? So I think it's a very different answer because it's where I went very earlier in the conversation, which is the experience that we now have at our fingertips is the thing that people focus on. Everything behind it is expected to be there when we type that in and hit send and that query goes out. We expect that whatever's on the back end generating those answers and delivering that information to us, we don't give a shit about that. We care more about making sure that we can connect onto the web or whatever source is going to deliver us that information. That's what people have come to assume. So I think everything behind it isn't where the consumer's mind's going to be. And even when I'm at work, no offense, no, I have the luxury of working from home. So when I go into the intranet at Lucid and I type something in, I expect it to be there. That's not going to change. And the minute I put that down, I grab my phone, I expect it to be there. And that's a very powerful and I think unbelievably unappreciated technology. And that's why I got into search, is that people just don't appreciate it. And I think it's awe-striking. One more question.
Any other? Aha. Oh, there you go. Hi. I wondered where he was running to.
Hello.
Morning.
Oh, you're Haas's.
Yeah, I'm
Mikkel.
the best friend of Haas.
Oh, here we go. All right.
I have a question. I'm not sure. I want to confirm my feelings. Am I right that there is a huge market about old OLAP systems, which is based on MDX, so the old proprietary OLAP systems? So is it correct and the worst to do to distinguish this market? And if it's worse to do, to separate it as a market, what do you feel about this segment? What's your vision of it and strategy?
So I think the OLAP market came along at a point in time when the complexity around reporting within organizations, especially financial information, was so overwhelming that they needed to develop new data structures in order for you to be able to effectively report on time series analysis and regression analysis and be able to put the multiple variables in a single spot that you could actually, do some reasonable projections that were all, in my opinion, focused primarily on the CFO. And I think that market is going to continue. I don't see search overtaking the OLAP market or the BI market. I see overlap in terms of delivering information systems, but I don't see, in other words, I don't know of anybody here that's interested in or any projects that are currently going on where we're going to start to worry about putting regression analysis or OLAP type capabilities into search in order to facilitate that through any kind of a dashboard or any kind of a report. So I see that market continuing. I see it, doing the things that it does very well. But I just see the overwhelming amount of content that search does a much better job of interrogation and query that BI always said that they were going to do. I mean, every BI capability that we sold, whether it was when I was at Business Objects or when I was at Jaspersoft, it was all about we were going to allow your users to query and be interactive with the content so that they could respond to business challenges. Even the CEO of Business Objects, right before they got acquired by SAP, had to acknowledge to the financial analysts that in their most successful implementation, they only touched maybe 10% of the employees in the enterprise. Search has the ability to touch 100%. As a matter of fact, it will be mandated, I think, over time, that search will touch 100%. So I don't see us consuming that. I see that continuing to evolve and be a very viable opportunity because it addresses a very specific set of problems and challenges in the enterprise. I just see search overwhelming it in terms of the market opportunity, especially as it relates to big data. Did I answer your question?
So what's the takeaway from all this?
So here's my challenge and my commitment, I guess. My commitment is we're going to continue to put stuff in the box, as you could hear in Grant and the passion that he has for this project. We're going to continue to make this, and we're going to continue to work with you to push the envelope around delivering what I am considering the next level of search platform. What will be truly an integrated set of features and capabilities that will allow you to deliver the most advanced information management applications that yet even have to be conceived. Your challenge, my challenge to you, I guess, is don't be afraid. If you continue to look at search as something that will, search your SharePoint or your Documentum repository or whatever, you're living in the yesterdays. If you start to look at search and you start to think about the opportunity that once you contextually integrate content from different applications or different repositories or different systems, the actual way that you can change your company and help that transform itself into being a data-driven organization is really where companies are going to survive and are going to evolve. Because every article I read from every analyst says that either you're going to move into this new paradigm, and this is what they're challenged. This is what IBM and HP and McKinsey and Company and Accenture and all these guys are telling your CEOs. They're saying unless you move your company to be a data-driven company, you will be run over. You will get outflanked. You will be outmaneuvered by somebody who's more nimble, somebody who understands their data better, somebody who understands the competitive landscape better. You people in this room are the enablers of that vision. But you can't be constrained by the thoughts of the past. So my challenge is challenge yourselves and challenge us and be proactive like Grant asked you to. And in that realization of us working together, I think you'll see a new generation of opportunity that I think it might change some of the people in the room who said that they don't see their career being in search for the long term. I think you might see some of that change. So that's all. Other than that, thank you very much. We really appreciate you all showing up here and participating and being part of this program. We don't make any money on this. As a matter of fact, in most cases, we lose money on this thing. But we do it because we think that this is an important venue. This is unlike any other conference that I've ever attended because the quality of the presentations, the level of technology, and I apologize if we sort of did an interrupt here and bored you with a bunch of market and business-oriented stuff, but the level of technical depth that goes on in this conference is unlike I've ever seen in any other conference I've ever been to. And it's all because you folks, demand this, you need this, you want this, and it's our privilege and pleasure to put it on. So, I thank you for your time, and like I said, I challenge you to think differently, when you go to work tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief.